there's a very big difference between the manifestation of fear and the manifestation of disgust. Now, I need you guys to keep that in mind. Now, I usually start the episodes off with a bit of a metaphorical or analogical example, but there's just way too much to cover here today. So, I would first like to give a shout out to Jay Novaks, my friend Low Nines, my good friend Uncommon, Sophia as well. Thank you very much for your service, Sophia. My friend Alfie, as well as my friend at the Deep Share podcast. I'd like to thank all of you so much for watching and supporting, and I truly appreciate it so very much. And even the Deep Share podcast, be sure to check out my friend. He's got a great show. So, let's jump into it. The Dark Alliance, salvaging NACHT-WAFFEN, synthetics for Saturnarian stasis. So first off, there's a lot to jump into here, so just bear with me as I kind of break this down. The NACHT-WAFFEN stands for the Dark Fleet. Now, what is the Dark Fleet? For those who don't know, there are a handful of secret space programs occurring within the shadow government. I mean, it's been leaked many times, whether it's through Ronald Reagan transcripts, you name it, right? Now, the NACHT-WAFFEN was a group of Nazi German scientists and soldiers that basically hid out in Antarctica and Agartha, if you will. There is a difference, but long story short, they've been there since the end of the Second World War, and they essentially established a secret space program with a certain alignment of the reptilians and the tall white alien species. Now, the NACHT-WAFFEN has in fact survived. They've been a bit of a small civilization, if you will, and there is some evidence of this within the Argentinian mountains and things like this, the Ukrainian areas and all that. Small towns in the mountains where there is still the Nazi regime going on. Now, this is not a Nazi or political episode, but it has to be said. And so a lot of these groups ended up forming into much smaller ones, having children, carrying on the overall mission of the secret space program. And these are in fact breakaway civilizations. Not exactly the ones that I guess we could say modern politicians and modern governments would agree with, but still, nonetheless, they have that technology and capability. Now, the question becomes: did Hitler survive along with that? Honestly, that's for another topic and another time, and for a couple different reasons. We'll be discussing that on Patreon as well too for the members. But the reason why I bring this up is because we have NACHT-WAFFEN, or the Dark Fleet, and then we have Solar Warden, which is basically the front official program of the secret space program. And many people might say, Dave, how come if it's a non-governmental organization, how can they still be active? Because again, folks, it's not about who you are, what position you hold. If you're a human being and you can gain access to this technology, you're right up there with the government, and that's just simply how it is. Now, I want to take a look at something called the electric universe theory. I bring this up because this ties in to one of the pyramids within Egypt that Janet Airlines uses, but the electric universe theory, also aligns with that of the Saturnarian proposal, which is that, everything in this universe can be curated, and at one point Saturn was looked upon as the eye of the god watching the people on Earth. And the reason for this, excuse me, and thank you for last night letting me cut the live stream short because of my throat. But the reason for this is because the overall goal within that of the electric universe theory aligns with the energetic spectrum that this new artificial pyramid is being built next to the Janet Airlines. And Janet Airlines stands for just another non-existent terminal for the actual classified Q clearance civilians and engineers that tend to go work on these projects in Area 51 and many other deep underground military bases. So let's take a look here. Mystery deepens. After near Area 51 pyramid, another pyramid structure located in Nevada. Earlier we reported Google Earth revealed giant pyramids near Area 51 base. Now we learn that there is another pyramid statue which is also located in Nevada. Interesting. Now, the electric universe theory subscribes to the ideology and possibility that many different forms of energy can in fact be harnessed with that of the shape of the pyramid. Now, you might be saying, Dave, why do you bring this up? Well, this ties into a lot of different things. The Saturnarian concept may in fact be that of a much more proposed and delegated form of research, and I have that particular research right here, and I'd like to thank my friend Genius for this. Right here is an outer space propulsion nuclear energy. This is in PDF form, but it was a classified document back in the 70s. Now, take a look at this. This is on page 73, and the link is in the description for anyone willing to check it out. Hypothetical space vehicle. Now watch this, folks. You see the diagram right here about how the hypotheticals, and again, hypothetical with air quotes, right? Take a look at how the space vehicle is shaped, right? Just take a few seconds to analyze that. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to show you some pictures taken of secret space program master motherships that cannot go into any planet's orbit because the way in which their propulsion and anti-gravity and zero-point energy system works, as a matter of fact, is entirely different. Now, let's take a look at these pictures right here. This is according to ProjectCamelotPortal.com. These were pictures taken. I don't even know if I'm allowed to be showing this, but whatever. Take a look at these pictures right here. You see these pictures? Does that not look the same as the diagram? I'll put the picture of the diagram up again. All right, now here's the thing. The electric universe theory, if we take a look at the Saturn polar configuration, again, according to everythingelectric.com, EU theory, the Saturn polar configuration, how could you physically set planetary shink-shame alignments in a Saturn-centric solar system? A basic framework of the very different Saturnarian reconstructions can be explained as the planets were in a different order with the Saturn central star or main body of our very local or the whole proto-sun system. Earth was a satellite of proto-Saturn, brown dwarf star type or original sun or etc. But our view of it was from relatively fixed positions. It loomed around and ruled above our pole, end quote. Now, I bring this up because where Saturn allegedly was at one point in time in our universe aligns with the Nazca lines, the artificial pyramid that's just there for quote unquote looks, but coincidentally enough, it's right next to Janet Airlines. Clearly there's some type of energy configuration that seems to be protecting these planes in the form of, any type of classified communication occurring on these planes so that nothing can get hacked with direct energy weapons or what have you. But it also has to do with many other different apparatuses too. However, when we take a look at the fact that this aligns with the Nazca lines, it aligns with the artificial pyramid that, is supposed to be just for looks. It also aligns with something else too, which is very, very interesting. If we take a look here at the secret gateway of the gods, and this is according to history101.com, the mysterious gate of the gods in Hayu Marsa, Peru. Now, according to this, the electric universe theory, this doorway may in fact have been a portal. Now, let's be honest. If human civilizations have been reset over and over and over again, they were not dumb enough to make a door that just, or what seemed to be the shape of a door that just led to nowhere. You see what I'm saying here? Now, the reason why I bring this up is because when I said at the beginning that fear is manifested in different forms, it is because this COVID pandemic, and this is not a COVID episode, but the pandemic that's going on right now is a fantastic use of exploiting a lot of different occurrences and a lot of different, I guess we could say, beings that the Solar Warden program is trying to take over from the NACHT-WAFFEN program. And what I mean by that is this. Let's take a look at this document right here. Disclosure about the secret space program. And this will be, and the Dark Fleet, excuse me. This will be on the link in the description as well. But you see this right here? This is page number 19. Stasis holding chambers. The PLC holds prisoners of war in cryo-sleeping fluidic chambers. As well, if there is brainwashing or brain wiping of memories being done, then these fluidic chambers are used for those purposes. These chambers also have the capability of creating torture scenarios for the individuals being held in the chambers. Now, before I go on, I just want to say very quickly, end quote, notice in the past couple of years that has been suddenly, particularly coming out of the UK, right, specifically drop-fed from the MI6, there's been all these articles having to do with, there's this new technology that can make criminals feel like they're being tortured for 20 years when in real time it's only 5 minutes. Where do you think that comes from? The secret space programs, as part of a drop-feeding scenario, find, revise, and perfect technology that then comes to Earth, that is then worked on even more to be even more perfected in the deep underground military bases, which then to the smallest degree of a fractal of a percent then gets filtered out into the public domain, which is why in the last 70 years there's been this sudden rush and revolution of technology. However, the reason for these stasis holding chambers, is because the Solar Warden fleet is trying to recruit, and if not recruit, then capture humans, reptilians, and insectoids that have aligned themselves with the Dark Fleet. And they're using COVID to do this because they're shutting down major areas, for example, like the fake glass pyramid that, again, emits the type of energy that aligns with the electric universe theory overall, but they're using that as a format, or a front, of saying, well, because of the COVID pandemic, you can't get close to it. Oh yeah, and by the way, it just so happens to be near, the terminals where no one else is allowed to go anyways to begin with, so okay, too bad. That's what I mean by the manifestation of fear and disgust is different, because if you manifest the idea of a frequentially negative thought onto the mass consciousness using the electric universe theory, what then happens, and I'm not saying this is correct, by the way, I'm just saying there is much evidence to suggest this. What then happens is that you then broadcast onto the masses whatever general ideology you want to perceive. Now, people like you and I are a little bit different because we don't fall for that kind of stuff, right? Now, the next thing I want to take a look at here, very interestingly enough as well, too, is this right here. This is according to UFO sightings hotspot.blogspot.com. not exactly a mainstream media website. You see these two pictures right here, ships and non-terrestrial officers? These are the original images in which Gary McKinnon, the guy who hacked into NASA, Pentagon, and DARPA computers back in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, hacked into and got all these names, non-terrestrial officers, and all the different ships. Take a look at that. And these are the ships that Ronald Reagan referred to as well back in the transcript when he accidentally let it slip on an official White House transcript that when he said, oh, I can't believe we have 300 people in space. When has there been 300? You guys see what I'm saying here? All right. Now, the next thing I want to point out too is that if we take a look at someone by the name here of Brian Gershman, all right, who was on this list, Gershwin, my apologies. What we're going to find is that his specialty was the high vacuum theory, and his rank was colonel. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The name Brian Gershwin has accidentally been slipped up on the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act leak, where he sits on the board of EG&G, the Battelle Corporation, and many other things as well too. And also, his name was mentioned as a possible officer for the secret space program in that document I just showed you from the 70s. How is that possible? Again, the 20 and back program, where you go into a form of regression where you are in a slightly different dimension, or your memories are wiped and you are basically reversed back into the time in which you were first taken and abducted for the secret space and super soldier program. Now, the next document I want to look at too, and I apologize if I'm going all over the place, but it's very, very important that we understand this here, is I want to take a look at this Dark Alliance document. Now, this is where it's going to get good. This was the Dark Alliance original document written by Gary Webb. Remember the guy who exposed the CIA basically getting a piece from the drug trade and all that stuff back in the 80s? The Iran-Contra thing? Yeah, you know that guy? He also made a connection to the fact that this same gentleman's name, the gentleman who I just mentioned, Brian Gershwin, was also on a handful of documents that were quickly picked up at a local sheriff's department when the Iran-Contra deal was about to be exposed, but then the CIA came and took those files. However, according to this document here, there was a sheriff who photocopied 10 of those copies, and Brian Gershwin's name remained on there. So the motion said CIA agents appeared at the sheriff's department within 48 hours of the raid and removed the seized files from the evidence room. But Braun said detectives secretly copied 10 pages before the documents were spirited away. Braun attempted to introduce them in the 1990 criminal trial to force the federal government to back off the case. Braun was hit with a gag order, the documents were put under seal, and Garner was convicted of corruption charges. End quote. You see how they do that? Right away, the second you find out you get close to the secret space program, boom, you're gone. Shut up. Don't even think about it. Don't even talk about it. Now, the next thing I want to point out here too, and again, I think it because it has to do with the fact that Brian Gershwin seems to be jumping all over the place, and people will begin to think, how old is this guy? What the hell's going on here? These are official government documents, and it's not making any sense whatsoever. Now, let's take a look here at this right here. This document, U.S. aborted fetal products, updated July 2010. Why is it that certain fetal products that have certain, I guess we could say, artificially used material that is inexplicable, and if you look it up, you won't find anything. You're going to have to use a certain part of the internet to even find something about this. And you'll find here, if you take a look, vaccines and manufacturers. Now, look at a lot of these companies. Are they not producing the COVID vaccine? And I'm not trying to create a controversy around COVID. What I'm saying is that one of the key elements within this different type of fetal product abortion and all these different chemicals is the black goo and the programmable matter. And we'll be discussing more of this on Patreon. We'll be bringing a lot more things full circle just because I can't really talk about too much of it publicly. But let's take a look at Colin Wilson's dissertation, The Mind Parasites.pdf. In 1967, he discusses about how he felt that his whole home was basically ingrained with this programmable matter and black goo because of something he saw and he knew way too much. This, again, is the concept of harnessing the electric universe theory that leads to the Asiatic powers that then leads to dynamic embodiment. So, if you might be saying, okay, Dave, what does this have to do with anything? Well, the overall concept of the Solar Warden secret space program being at war with the Dark Fleet or the NACHT-WAFFEN has never been stronger. This is not all of the insectoids, all the reptilians, and just some humans against the Solar Warden fleet. This is a small faction of them, but very powerful, very knowledgeable, and very wise because they know there's not that many of them, and therefore they kind of do their own things, but at the same time, they kind of have to blend in as well too. And the other thing is that if you take a look at the fact that there have been very recently a lot of blue orb sightings in the sky, a lot of them are that of the Pleiadians descending from the higher dimensions, sending certain observatory apparatuses or mechanisms similar to the way that we would send, our rover to Mars. They send their beams of energy to speculate and observe. With that being said, the reptilians, the insectoids, and the NACHT-WAFFENs, the Nazis that are underground at this point in time near the Antarctica area, also have their own version that tends to blend in with the Pleiadians' blue orbs, because if they emit an orb that is out of place, the Galactic Federation will then step in, and that is the last thing they want, because right now the battle is only between the Solar Warden and the Dark Fleet. It is a form of asymmetrical warfare, and those on Patreon will see we have analyzed footage of all these UFOs lining up in the sky above the skies of Antarctica as if they're guarding something. What are they guarding? What are they ready for? You see what I'm saying here? Now, the next thing is that the NACHT-WAFFEN partnered with certain insectoids to utilize the Gate of the Gods in the Hayu Marsu, Peru. Now, here's the thing. If you go there right now, again, this goes back to what I said at the beginning with regards to COVID. The exploitation of fear and disgust is different. You can technically still go to the Gate of the Gods in Peru right now, but what they're saying is, well, it's very disgusting. You want to touch that wall. You know what's happening there. This is how they do it. They throw it in your face, and then they use either the manifestation of fear or disgust. People think it's one and the same. It's not, because what happens is when you push the fear of the manifestation of disgust over fear, what happens then is you create metaphorical and literal borders in the name and justification, even though it's bullshit, in the name of cleanliness. You see what I'm saying? And what happens not only when you manifest physical borders around people to isolate them, whether it's a town, a building, or even a whole city, it doesn't matter, small scale or big scale, it's all relative, right? What happens then is you then purposefully control the flow of ideas, and this has to do with the electric universe theory, because think about it like this, guys. If you're in a room with 10 people and it's an open room and you're all chatting and you're shooting the shit, having a good time, and then a bunch of people come in and start putting walls around all of you, there's a much less likely chance you're going to be able to exchange ideas and forms of free thinking. And that physical barrier, using the electric universe theory and proposals similar to that of what we discussed with the Saturnarianism, seems to manifest a form of suppression without us even knowing it. And those on Patreon will know even more what I'm talking about. You see what I'm saying here? Because when you have a wall in front of you, you start to think, what's the point of even thinking of new ideas if I can't share it with anybody? You see what I'm saying here? And the Dark Fleet is harnessing that, especially during the COVID pandemic. It could not have been better for these type of people, and it's absolutely true, right? Now, the next thing I want to mention too is dynamic embodiment. So according to Danielle McCulloch, dynamic embodiment is a holistic healing practice and mind-body education that includes observation, touch, movement, and mindfulness. All right? It is a blend concept from body-mind centeringo, Laban movement analysis, and body-based psychotherapies. The practice follows the dynamic cycle of growth, which in short involves observing what is happening, providing support where needed, and providing options for different movement strategies where desired, end quote. Now, does this not remind you of the torsion field theory that seems to be very similar to that of the way in which there is some type of sacred geometry and energy being used? And Nikola Tesla has subscribed, again, to the electric universe theory of the ghost particle. The New York Times article that just came out about a week ago saying that there's something that's shaken up the universe that the scientists at CERN can't figure out. Yeah, okay, as if they can't figure it out. You know what I mean? So what's happening here is that the dynamic embodiment of the energy of this whole concept of using the ether and different kinds of ether through different dimensions ultimately leads to the torsion field theory of the Searle disk, as what was mentioned a couple episodes ago. And not only that, but this generally then leads to overall, I guess you could say a civil war, if you will, as well as black goo being inserted into some of these fetal products as well. So I would like all of you to let me know what you think, because it is absolutely, I would dare to say, some of the biggest connections I made so far with regards to the secret space program and the names of some of these officers sitting on different boards and different apparatuses of companies and all that, even though technically speaking, they technically wouldn't have existed or have been very young in the 70s, and their name is popping up again in the early to mid 2000s. You see what I'm saying? So we'll be covering a lot more of this on Patreon, but for those that have just showed up and have just discovered the channel, thank you so much, and we'll catch you guys later. Cheers.